when we see change happen, it happens incrementally over time. And it happens in a way that's consistent with the theme and the character of the community. The bottom line is, as we go through this general plan cycle, we've got about 11,600 acres, 18.5 square miles in Danville. We need to find 9.6 acres of land that hasn't been designated for development, and we have to designate it so that it can develop in the future, and it has to be developed with multifamily housing. It has to be developed with multifamily housing at densities that are anywhere from 20 units per acre up to 35 units per acre. So it's consistent with the Sycamore Place senior housing project, for example, or the Rose Garden Apartments, or the preserves on Fostoria Way. The general plan identifies some potential locations where this can happen, and as part of this process, the Planning Commission, the Town Council, with plenty of public feedback, are going to need to decide what sites are chosen or designated and what sites are off the table. So that's all part of this process. Not all of the sites that are being looked at are sites that are going to be chosen. Let me give you a little bit of context on growth before I move off onto another topic, and that is just simply this. Our previous general plans in 1987, when we looked out to the year 2005, we forecast a population of about 43,000 people. In our 1999 general plan, we looked out to 2010, and that forecast increased to about 44,600. Our actual population as of the beginning of 2012, about 42,200. And that was up from 41,700 in 2000. So there was a 12-year period where, according to the U.S. Census, the State Department of Finance, the amount of growth that we had was about 500 people over a 12-year period. This general plan that is currently going through the process of being reviewed right now forecasts out to 2030 that we could have an increase to about 46,600 people in Danville. That's about an 11% increase. And that assumes that every vacant piece of property left to be developed in town is developed. So what I'm suggesting to you is that that hasn't happened in the past, but that's a worst case scenario of what's forecast in the general plan when we go out through 2030. General plan also designates an area within our downtown as something called a priority development area. That's been a little bit controversial. We've never had one of those before. What's a PDA? Well, a PDA is an area that is intended to be designated so that if you're going to try to focus on some infill development, you can identify where that should occur. And in our case, it's in and around our downtown. It's along the I-680 freeway corridor. Designating a PDA doesn't mean that the land uses within the PDA change. It's a line on a map, and I'll be perfectly candid with people, and I've said this all along. It also puts us in line to be able to compete for and receive transportation funds that are eligible to come back to Danville that we can spend to maintain our local streets and roads. And we don't think it's a bad thing to position ourselves to be able to receive tax dollars back that our residents and our businesses have paid. Does it mean that we're willing to compromise the character and the quality of the community to do that? No, it doesn't. In Contra Costa County, so far, there are 3 cities, Danville is one of them, Clayton and Brentwood are the other 2, that haven't designated PDAs up to this point. So one of the things that the general plan looks at is, do we want to designate a PDA, and if we're going to do it, where should we do that? A third issue that you may have heard a lot about is Measure S, which is a local measure that was passed by our voters back in 2000. It was a town-sponsored measure, and it was intended to protect open space, agricultural land, and parks and recreation land. About 40% of the land in Danville is protected by Measure S. What Measure S did is it said, if those properties are shown on the general plan land use map, you cannot change the use on those properties without a vote of the people. That's what Measure S did. So the 2030 general plan will be different because the last time we did a general plan in 1999, the measure hadn't passed yet, didn't exist. So the measure is being carried into the current general plan for the first time. Now, it's been suggested that we're trying to circumvent Measure S. We're trying to interpret it in ways that it wasn't meant to be interpreted. What I'll say is I'm happy to come back and have that conversation with you at another time when we have another half hour. A lot of this, I think, has been driven by a development application that's getting ready to go to public hearing, which is the McGee-Somerville application. That starts next week. And opponents of that application have argued that the measure applies to rezoning of property, whether or not any development can happen on ag land, and so on. So as I said, separate conversation for another time. It affects about 300 acres in town, and it affects the potential to develop up to about another 60 homes. And the last thing that's new in this general plan is this is the first time that we will address the issue of sustainability. So changes in state law over the last 10 years are now requiring agencies to look at things like reducing carbon footprint, greenhouse gas reduction, and so on. There are targets that we are supposed to try to hit by the year 2020, and again by the year 2050. Our general plan essentially incorporates many of the practices that we currently have ongoing that relate to things like green building, recycling, water, energy conservation, improved walking and biking facilities. They're all voluntary measures in our general plan. We know we can meet these 2020 targets, so we're addressing the issue of sustainability for the first time, and this is something that has generated controversy for some of the folks that have been in attendance at these hearings. So let me wrap up by saying that we've heard some criticism that the town is trying to cede its local control to regional entities, unelected regional bodies, that there's a movement afoot to try to change the scale and the character of Danville. As I said, from my perspective, credibility, part of looking at credibility is looking at where we've come to arrive at where we are, and then asking yourself the question, where are we going to go from there, and how are we going to move forward? This needs to be a general plan that's for our town, that is by our town, that is committed to retaining the vision of the small town character, the uniqueness of the community. We have leaders that have constantly advocated for local control and against outside interference from regional, state, and federal agencies on a number of different levels, while complying with the minimum statutory requirements that we're required to comply with in order to uphold the law. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to address you on this. Again, I want to ask you to go to www.danvillegeneralplan.com. We invite you to be engaged in this process right now. The Planning Commission is going through public hearings. We've had 4. There are going to be 1 or 2 more before the Planning Commission. Then it'll move on to the Town Council with a recommendation, more public input, more public hearings, and by the time this process is completed sometime late spring or whatever the process dictates, we'll have a new general plan that will allow us to look forward another 17 years and see what we need to do to work together to uphold this community vision. So thank you very much for your attention, and be happy to field any questions.
Just a few minutes real quickly for questions.
Sure.
Let's keep it concise, quick, short, and then we got to do still community announcements, and we'll wrap it up. Yes, ma'am.
Just a quick one. What's going on with the old Danville Hotel? What's going on with the
Yeah, that's a good question, and one that I get asked frequently, and probably a phone call I should have made yesterday before I came here, because I haven't spoken to those folks since probably the end of November.
It's Castle, right?
It's Castle and Neuron Properties that are a partnership. Danville Hotel, there was a project that was approved on the Danville Hotel site, probably better than a year ago now. It is a 2-story residential over retail and restaurant project that will preserve the historic hotel, the Macaulay House on Harts Avenue, and then redevelop the balance of the site from the corner of Harts down to the corner of Railroad and then south along Railroad Avenue. It's about 37,000 square feet, I think, altogether on that site. Pardon me? That's the footprint. And fortunately, we have local builders, local families that are involved in developing this property because they've had some challenges with lenders who want them to put up more equity to finance and build the project. But they've successfully navigated through that. What they've told us is that they intend to start the demolition of the buildings that are on the site sometime this spring, and then start construction of the project in 2013.
Have you seen the blueprint of the new project?
We've seen the approved plans, but they're not at a point where they're submitted for plan check and going through the plan review process. Yeah.
So let's hit everybody really quickly. Who else do we have here?
I just think.
Raise your hands.
I just wanted to ask Mike if he remembers what he paid for his first house in Danville.
I built it. $20,000. On a half acre.
Yeah, I would ask Joe, I'm one of those people that thinks that ABAG is another socialist bureaucracy that wants to take away our freedom, to take away our town's freedom. What's the benefit of being associated with them at all? And is it mandatory? Why are we talking to them?
Yeah. ABAG isn't mandatory. 101 cities and 9 counties belong to the Association of Bay Area Governments here in the Bay Area. They've been around since 1961. With respect to this process, we have to go through this regional housing needs allocation either through ABAG or directly with the state of California. Folks have said to us, why don't you get out of ABAG? My response to that is, number one, being a part of the process gives you a seat at the table and a voice in the process. If we're not dealing with ABAG, we're dealing directly with state HCD, and I like my chances of dealing with ABAG better than I've enjoyed the experiences that I've had dealing directly with the state of California. Number two, as we've gone through the process and looked at the way that the numbers have been determined and assigned to Danville, what we believe is that ABAG arguably underassigns numbers to Danville. When you look at Danville as part of the Tri-Valley region, this housing cycle, we're supposed to be planning for 583 more homes within Danville. That represents 5% of the housing growth in the Tri-Valley. Right now, we represent 14% of the population. So I think you can effectively argue that we're being underassigned our allocation, not being overassigned our allocation. Third thing is that we're responsible for designating land, not building homes. So folks have expressed concerns that, you're allocated this number of homes this cycle. Next cycle, you're going to get allocated another 500 or 600 homes that are going to need to be built. Well, that's not accurate. We're assigned numbers for this housing cycle. The next housing cycle, ABAG is going to look at what we've either entitled or built in our community as a result of the current cycle. And if we haven't entitled or built development on those sites, we're going to get to count them against the next housing cycle. The only way we're not going to do that is if we don't have a state certified housing element. If we don't have a housing element, or if our element is decertified, then that increment gets added on top of the current cycle, okay? Another point that I would make is that I think that we've successfully navigated now through 4 different RMA cycles so that we've been able to address those requirements and do it in a way that's been consistent with the character of the community. I understand that people have raised some concerns which I believe are ideological. We shouldn't be involved in ABAG because anything that suggests that we're involved in regionalism, suggests that we're willing to give up local control of what goes on here. But if you look at the past history and you look at what's been done to get us to the point where we are, I think that actions speak louder than words.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it. So we're just out of time right now. I don't want to get everybody out of here. But thank you. We have a big round of applause.